And we're live. Yes, we are. How's it going, everybody? Dan Schinder here with Lou Calderola on Under the Influence. And I promise, even though it might seem like one of us is, I'm not. How about you, Lou? It is, after all, the
No,
weekend.
just my soda, my reliable caffeinated soda.
Yeah, I'm not a huge coffee drinker, but I just downed a bunch of coffee because I was just feeling like, ugh. I've been up since, well, not as early as usual. Usually I'm up at 4. I was up at 5:30 this morning, but I'm starting to feel the burn already. But excited to do this. We have a neat topic today, jazz and rock.
Yeah, and episode 12 too. We're
Yeah.
really going along a little over a year now.
Yeah, we've been doing this more than a year, folks, but it's only episode 12 because there's like a couple months here and there that we missed because of just holidays or scheduling or whatever. So we're plugging along. We appreciate you following. Go ahead and chime in with kind of what Lou and I talk about when it comes to jazz and rock. And to me, the obvious thing is that a lot of the players that came out of the 60s didn't have rock influences. They only played jazz. When you look at like John Bonham, Keith Moon, Mitch Mitchell, um, Danny Seraphine, people of that era kind of invented rock. They took jazz and just did something different with it. And you can still hear it in the music, not only from back then, but even more recently, right?
hmm Yeah, today we're going to cover a whole bunch of different topics from the earlier to the bit more modern, and how those beats kind of showed up in some popular rock songs.
Yeah, we each have 3 examples. We're going to show clips. And Lou, you're first. Take it away.
Well, all right. Might as well, as we were mentioning, you were just saying there was some of those early drummers who, at that era, that's what they were playing, and then they just did their thing with their bands, and kind of created those rock foundations. So, first one here is, as one of the guys you mentioned, Mitch Mitchell, and his work with the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Mitch is such a fun drummer to watch. So, such, no pun intended, such fire in his playing and the way he moved around the kit. But his jazz influence was really obvious, in his playing. And so I took a first example from Mitch to show, well, here's some definite classic swing right in some Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, and what song is it?
Third Stone from the Sun.
Oh, man, I was trying to place it and I was like lost on it. I don't know why, but now that you say that, yeah. And not because of your playing, but it didn't lock into the slot there. So here we go. Check out Lou with his example of jazz and rock. Mitch Mitchell, Third Stone from the Sun. Here we go. Very smooth indeed. Good example. What made you choose that one?
Just always, and whenever, especially when you first brought up the topic, right? When we were a couple, what was it, a month or so ago, when you said this would be a great idea, that that just was always one of the first songs that comes to mind when people mention a great rock song, and that classic jazz, swing beat. And I just, one of my favorite Hendrix songs, that not only the intro being so cool and so tasteful, but that riff as I was fading out there, that main riff. Oh, what a great classic
Yeah.
classic riff in general, you know, even though it doesn't, you know, it doesn't really say a jazz beat there, but just love that song, love that riff. And as mentioned, when you brought up the topic, that was just bing, that was the first example. Like, I know the first one I'm going to pick.
That's cool. My first one, I was saying to Lou before we started when I recorded these this morning, I couldn't remember the third song. I'm like, man, what was the third one? And it was the first one I thought of when we talked about this, strangely enough. But I'm saving that one for last. The first one I'm picking, I chose because it's of the most classic example of a classic rock band. It's Led Zeppelin. Jazz and Led Zeppelin. There's actually a few examples, and there's a couple other examples I wanted to use, but I could not find really good bootleg versions of them. And one of them they
Right.
never played live, which is Darlene. So it towards the
Yeah.
whole outro of Darlene from Coda, that's all like a big fat swing beat, and it's really
Mhm.
cool. But there's no bootleg version, and I can't play to the original versions because it gets muted. I'm sure folks are tired of hearing me say that, and other people that haven't heard it going, "Oh, you can't do that." No, it'll get muted and flagged, and it's a
Mhm.
pain in the butt. So I chose "How Many More Times." So here's a short
What a
snippet
great
of
one.
that. Yeah, this is from 1973, actually, which now I got an eyelash in my eye, and which is odd to me because it's not on any of the other bootlegs I've heard from the Houses of the Holy tour. So I'm wondering if maybe the year is wrong on the recording that I found that I'm playing to. And I'm playing this on my little jazz kit. So here we go with How Many More Times. Just an easy, classic little swingish beat. Here we go. Oop, missed that one. That's a fun song to play, trying to get the player out of the way. There we go.
That's yeah. That
Yeah,
was
and
great. What a great song. Yeah, you're right. So what an awesome song.
yeah, and I'm noticing that I think my volume was kind of low on there, so hopefully people heard it, or maybe hopefully not. What's your second one?
Uh,
Oh, that's from
moving like I
1968, the original recording, by the way, folks.
uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, what a great part. That was also one that comes to mind pretty
yeah,
quickly when you say jazz, you know, in rock
yeah. And
songs.
oh, I just remembered also in 1968, two albums in one year. Today is the 54th anniversary, October 22nd, 1968, that Led Zeppelin 2 came out. So that's back when you
Mm.
remember when Led Zeppelin, Rush, all these bands were putting out an album every year. You do an album, then you tour, then go into the studio, then you put out the album, then you go on the tour, go back in the studio. Now it's like Peter Gabriel puts out an album every 10 or 12 years, I think. Other bands aren't quite as slow, but Peter's earned it.
So for you know, moving through some of the different eras as we were talking about with the evolution of the jazz, you know, beats showing up in rock, I tried to kind of go a little move a little along the timeline with my choices today. So jumping into the 70s, and drummer Artemis Pyle, who you know, Leonard Skinner, what a super cool dude,
Yeah.
still out there doing his thing. And this one was trying to find, you know, trying to find a good, like you said, trying to find a good bootleg of this that I could play along to. So, and this one was kind of cool because it also incorporated on the original studio track of this the classic swing beats right there in the beginning, but then it switches to a little bit more rock groove when the band joins in on the main riff. But what he would do on some of the live versions is still keep that swing shuffly part going a bit during the rock intro. So I
Yeah.
did a version of that here on this
Cool.
example as well.
Cool. This is awesome. Check this out, folks.
Let's get ready to boogie!
Very cool. Fitting
Fun
too.
intro.
Yeah, that's nice. Cool. So my next one is okay, so I kind of goofed on my second one. So my brain went to Jethro Tull, and I thought through the first like three albums, which is certainly a lot more jazzy intentionally. They were like a jazz blues folk band in the first three albums, still carried through the folk and the Renaissance stuff as they got more rockish and proggy as they went along. But what I did was I played to a song that really isn't rock at all, but I love this song and it's by a rock artist. So I thought it qualifies. I hope it could squeak it in. And it's Ian Anderson playing with um, a small orchestra, a concert I found a few years ago with him and I forgot the gentleman's first name. His last name's Griminelli, another flautist who's more classical. And it at the time featured the bass player and the drummer, not Don Perry, the one that came after Don. It's a great recording. So it's Boris, and it's not rock, but it's by a rock artist, and it's a jazz beat, and I'm sticking with that. So here you go, folks. It's a really great concert to watch, by the way. It's a bootleg recording shot from the audience, but they
Well
do
done.
some
Well done.
yeah, oh, thank you. And they do some classics, like the orchestra members kind of come and go. At some point, it's like a much smaller ensemble. Then the other people come back, and they do some of the classics, and it's really, really, really fun. That was my dad's favorite rock band, actually, and I discovered this after he had passed, and I think it was around, maybe not. I don't remember, but my dad and I used to listen to a lot of Toll together. Never
So for
saw
the
them together though.
drummers, would
Pardon me?
that have been would the drummer for that would be Mark Craney?
No, that was way after Mark. Doan was the longest sitting drummer for Jethro Tull, and I can't think of the gentleman's name. It was on Broadsword and the Beast. I think it's that drummer. I just can't think of the guy's name. I should have made notes. But that's a really old song from Stand Up or Benefit. Stand Up. It's from Stand Up, I believe. I'm
It's
sure
funny, like
this.
you're saying too, with early on with most of the folks that were picking on these. Oh, the drummers would have been initially influenced by jazz drummers
Clive
and
Bunker
jazz
for that one.
music, and yeah, there's some great, great stuff like that. Now, how about yourself? When first drumming and first getting into music, would you say jazz was an influence in your drumming as well?
You know what? It wasn't at all. I mean, like, not at all. I really didn't discover jazz. Like, I mean, I knew what it was, but I mean, as a player,
Of course.
yeah, until I was in junior high school, which back in my day, that started in seventh grade. So I was 12 and a half, turned 13 in seventh grade, and I played in the concert band, and then I joined the Tuesday night jazz band. And that's when I kind of got influenced by jazz, although I had a Buddy Rich record called Speak No Evil, I think it was, which I really dug. And then I got into jazz much later, and I think maybe even appreciated fusion before I really got into traditional jazz. And my first introduction to fusion, so I kind of went backwards: rock, fusion, jazz. And for
Hmm.
fusion, when I heard Romantic Warrior Return to Forever, that was just mind blowing. Like, oh, there's no rules in music. Like that's what this did to me. So yeah. How about you? Was jazz an early influence for you?
I would have to say almost same model that you just described in a way. Really, it was for me. Motown was the first my folks, and that was the like a lot
Oh,
of the music that was on in the house when I was really young. So like
oh,
that whole Motown era kind of thing, but then into rock were my first influences, and what really got Keith Moon and Rush were really sold me. But then yeah, as got a little older, that led me to more fusiony kind of things, and then getting into middle school, high school, and school band. Well, you got to learn to play the jazz swing if you're going to be
yeah,
doing the school band. And then I started to go into it more there, and then learn the appreciation. I mean, growing up, I knew Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich. I thought they were so cool I would watch, anything that you can get a chance to on, if they were on like a TV special or something, and would love to watch them play.
yeah.
But I couldn't, I didn't study the music at that age.
Right. And what I did learn, and I'd love to hear from the audience, and if you're drummers or any other musician or even just music fans, where does jazz fit in for you? And I see some comments I'll get to in a moment. And
Cool.
what I did learn from jazz later is that it helped me when I went back to some more complicated music, ELP, yes, Genesis, Rush, stuff like that.
Hmm.
It helped with the syncopation and weird time signatures and hitting beats on the off beats and stuff like that. So it was sort of that backwards evolution I think we both shared.
Right? Yeah, you get to that age, and I'm sure some of my students out there know what I'm talking about. Is you get to that point where you realize some of that stuff's like, oh, that's why I'm supposed to practice those things that I never practice.
Right, exactly. I think also finesse and just that whole dexterity of the swing with the right hand on the cymbal and even the little feather beats and stuff like that with the left hand on the snare if you're right-handed, the other way around if you're the other way. Producer Steven Schindler's correcting me and says that 1969, not 1968. Thank you very much for that. Duh, I even said 54 years. It's Sunday, my math brain isn't on. And Joshua VP says, Lou, is that a
Hey,
ping
Josh.
ride? Yeah, talk about your ride.
Oh,
That's Joshua VP in Belgium.
cool. Much appreciated. Yeah. Hey, what's going on, Josh? That is, thank you. I love that ride. I bought that ride in 1980. Well, I think I want to say three or four. That is an old Zildjian Platinum rock ride, a 21-inch rock ride, Platinum. And I had, I just thought the whole idea back then of the concept of silver cymbals, I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. So I bought a
Now
huge
they come in
collection of the
blue, black,
Platinums.
red,
I know, right?
purple, which I think look
um,
cool, but
that yeah, I kept that, and I still have a few of the old Platinums from back in the day.
I
Not
forgot
the
about those.
Titaniums. The
Yeah.
Titaniums were like a reissue later, but those were more of a student model
Yeah, they were
symbol. They
thinner
were
and lighter weight,
yeah,
weren't they?
and
Yeah.
much less expensive. The that's just like, this is basically a regular A custom ride, but they did it with the dipping in the Platinum, which the reason that the Platinums lasted for such a short period of time was environmentally, they quickly found out there's something in that process that was not so good for the environment. So the
Oh,
Platinums were shut down after production of just a couple short years. And
wow. So does
I
that make
kept
yours
a
like a
bunch.
collector's item?
A little bit. I mean, they do. I did at one point sell quite a few on eBay and recoup quite a bunch of money that I had spent on them after having them for 25 years.
Wow.
And I kept almost one set. I still have Ride, Crash, Splash, China, and then a smaller. Oh, actually, I have two different size splashes. That's what it is. Two splashes, a Crash. I don't have a set of hi-hats anymore. But I sold them off though. Thank you for asking. I love that Ride cymbal. Sounds so sweet. That bell is beautiful and records awesome. Yeah, but it does sound a bit like a Ping, but it's a 21 Rock Ride.
Cool. That's cool. Thanks for answering and thanks for asking, Joshua. Everyone's always welcome to chime in with questions. Simon Goodchild says, what's your favorite snare drum to use? Do you tune high like Peart? And I'm pretty sure he's referring to you, probably knows you're a Neil Peart fan because many people might not know this, but Lou's in the longest standing operational gigging playing Rush tribute band.
Yeah, Limelight's getting ready to go into year 23. Well, I'm at the time of the day where I'm getting this cool but wacky glow. So yeah, and thank you for again, guys, for asking. Always happy to check in on any of those
snare
questions.
Does look like it's a foot deep. The one in your videos
it's
that we're seeing.
It does. It's funny. You think a standard snare is either a 5 or a 6 by 14. This is only a 6.5 by 14. It looks a lot,
really,
bigger. Yeah. That acrylic snare, Romano and the guys over at RCI. I love that snare to death. The reason here's a fun. I'll go into that a second after the tuning thing. I do. Thank you. I'm glad you noticed. I definitely tune my snares a little higher. I've always liked I basically tune both heads very similar. So both the bottom and the top head are both a little on the crank side because I love that snap. And it's still, then I'll adjust the wires so I still have that versatility of having if I need to do a nice roll, you can get that march out of it.
Yeah.
But I love a good crack and a good pop, off the snare. And I found that this one really gives me the versatility more so than a lot of my other snares, which I was a little surprised, honestly, out of a acrylic to be that versatile.
Yeah.
I love that. But the neat story as to why 6.5. The dress diamonds that Romano did on those to make them look extra cool. I have the snares and the bass drum in that kit have the dress diamonds on it. Those were done and made and inspired with Romano by Chad Smith for a couple of his Chili Peppers kits.
Right.
And a lot of those were left over. And Romano was like, well, hey, since we're doing some of your other drums with this, how you want to use some on the snare? I said, yeah, that sounds great. But he said, hey, to make it really look right and get the best look on the snare, I know you had mentioned let's do like a 6, which is standard. Would you have any objection to do 6.5 so those diamonds would sit a lot nicer? Because I believe the snares they made for Chad were 8 deep, so those diamonds sat beautifully in the middle. You had plenty of room on either side.
Yeah.
If I had done a 6, the hardware would have covered them some. So we went with a 6.5, so they still show up nicely. And probably you never know that little extra depth may add some of that pop that I wanted and really enjoy in that snare.
So is that the main snare you use with Limelight? Maybe that's also what Simon
sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do use that kit, the Moondust kit, a couple times with Limelight because I just love that kit. But being, again, trying to be a little loyal to the sound. I typically use my RCI Coke Bottle Green kit because the small drums are small shells, where the small drums on the Moondust kit are octobans, which Neil never really used those, and they do have a different sound. You got that Mike Portnoy, Stuart Copeland small drum sound, or the Neil Peart small drum sound. Yeah. So I usually would use either my Precision Drum Company wooden kit, but I've recently scaled that down to a smaller kit. And typically the green RCI kit is the live gigging kit most of the time with Limelight.
That's cool. And I remember reading, and I think it was the Snakes and Arrows tour, or it was the Ghost Rider tour. Was that the name of that album? No. What's the album that was before Snakes and Arrows?
Where you got Vapor Trail,
Yeah, Vapor Trail,
possibly is the
sorry.
one you're thinking
Yeah,
of.
it was one of those two tours. I read an interview with Neil, and he said that at the time, I don't know for how long before or after, but he would use the wood snares indoors and alloy outdoors because of
Neat.
weather and whatnot.
Yeah, sure. Of
Temperature
course.
changes and all. You know, he set up in the afternoon that cools off 20 degrees, depending on where you are and what time by the time you play, and all the temperature changes. The alloy
Yeah.
just had more integrity of maintaining.
That
you
makes
its
sense,
state.
right?
Yeah. So very
I remember
cool.
the first time, even with the acrylics, after I first got the acrylics and used them with Limelight, there was one gig where we were setting up and we were covered. It was under a tent, but it was outside, and you just got that afternoon little bit of light rain and drizzle. And, you know, everybody's running around to cover up the electronics and stuff. And I was like, well, sure, I don't want the kit to get wet, but I don't have to hurry. It's not like these are wood shells. I was like,
Right.
I just kind of took my time. You know,
Yeah, if
so
anything,
that
they'll
was,
leave
I was like,
spots.
oh, yeah, right.
That's funny. And Joshua mentioned my Zildjian Earth Ride. That is the cymbal I'm using. It doesn't have grooves. It's really thick. I bought
Yeah.
it brand new in 1979 because I'm like 80 years old. And it's like grungy looking. It's like acid bath stained and stuff.
They're very
and
cool looking.
yeah, and it just is so reminiscent of that like 40s and 50s jazz, dry, really super
Yep.
dry and staccato sounding. It doesn't have much ring. It has like a low hum undertone, but as far as the brightness, forget it. It's when you hit it, that's when you hear it, and that's it. Cool. So thanks for the questions, guys.
Yeah, thanks everybody for chiming in.
Yeah, where did we leave off? With
Number three, I got
It's to
moving
you
into
now.
the 80s actually. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was kind of going through, walking through some of the decades there.
Yeah.
So we're in the 80s now. So I actually went for one which was such a great, you know, rock song that came out. It was like an anthem. You know, everybody, even if you probably didn't listen to a lot of rock radio, you knew this song at the time when Joe Satriani came on the scene with Surfing with the Alien. You know, which funny, in reading up on this and doing the notes, I knew that some of that there was, you know, some drum programming that was obvious on some of it, but I guess this song, the Satch Boogie, was the only song that he ended up with the budget to do full living human drummer. I guess there was some other additives on things, but they ended up, you know, with the budget that they had and the time that they were trying to get the album out. He ended up going with a lot of the drum programming that he had originally set with the stuff. And, you know, they did whatever they could on the tracking. And a drummer, Mr. Jeff Campitelli, who worked with Joe a lot, you know, in those early eras, but and I believe is on a lot of the tracks on the following release, if I'm correct. He ended up playing the drums with Joe and orchestrating the stuff on Satch Boogie, which ended up being like the only real full song with live drums on Surfing with the Alien. And that just what a cool riff there. But it again starts with that classic swing beat, but then Joe's guitar comes in and said, wait a minute, this is a little different.
That's cool. Here we go with Satch Boogie. Listen for the jazz in the rock. That's our theme today. Very cool. When did you get into Joe's music? Was it back around that
Um,
time when he came on the scene?
Yeah, I always love and still to this day, I love instrumental rock music. Guitar. Working with the Joe Guerrieri project, where it's Joe's, all instrumental, guitar stuff. I love projects like that because often, in many cases, a lot of those projects have these wonderful drummers and have the freedom to really, get a little more expressive on the kit sometimes when you're perhaps not staying out of the way to just be the foundation underneath a great vocal.
Right.
That's why one of the things that always appealed to me. So I remember when the album came out, my friends and I, who were all into that kind of stuff, and some of the bands I was in at the moment, a couple of the guitar players being really into those type of players, and I had right when that came out, that was something I noticed right away, and really always dug that song from right at the get go.
Cool. This next one was my first choice, but I'm saving it for last. And it might be one of the most obvious in a way. Um, it's Emerson Lake and Palmer, Carnival 9, Second Impression. And to my knowledge, there is no bootleg of this out there. There are two that are listed as if they're bootlegs and have their own artwork, but they are in fact the exact same night from Long Beach, California in February of 74 when they did record Welcome Back, My Friends, to the Show That Never Ends, ladies and gentlemen, Emerson Lake and Palmer, which, by the way, still holds the record for most words, consonants, vowels, and letters all together in an album title. And it's a triple album. So I could not find a bootleg. So what I did find was two things. I found a gentleman who just played the piano part, but right after that, I found something really cool that was done through file sharing. Do you know who Rachel Flowers is?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
Rachel Flowers on piano,
awesome.
George Barbaros on synthesizers. So she's in USA, he's in Hungary, Steve Barber on percussion in USA, Alex Fagan on bass in Italy, and I'm not sure about this other name. Sorry, it's Mihaly Tunkili in Hungary as well on audio and mixing. This is really a great recording. So I did all these in one take, as you all can tell today. And I hit the recording, and the drummer Steve starts out with the drum fill. There's no count in, so I just kind of let him do that and jump in. But was fascinated with this piece when I heard it as a kid. It came out in 74. I heard it probably shortly after it came out, Brain Salad Surgery. And if you think about it, those of you familiar with the music and you think of First Impression, Carnival 9 First Impression, you go through all that just craziness. And then there's this light finessey jazz thing that turns into this steel drum thing. It's just an amazing suite of music, these
Yeah.
three, movements. So I took a stab at this because I felt it's probably one of the most obvious, or certainly the most indulgent, bringing jazz into rock music, which of course has other influences too. So here we go. There we go. Second Impression. Okay, I got it. Here we go. Oops. There you go. Such a
Awesome. Very
fun,
cool.
such a fun piece. I just love that. Yeah.
Remember the same, like when as you were saying about, you know, discovering that was similar for a few years when I was probably getting ready to go into my college years. I mean, I knew Emerson, Lake and Palmer and all, and I had even taken those couple lessons in high school with Carl, which I was lucky enough to
Oh,
do.
really?
Just yeah, he did some things in the tri-state area there, and there was like a clinic at Robbie's Music, which was Robbie's Music. That was either Rockland County or it might have been New Jersey.
What year?
So
What time period for reference of what Carl was up
let's
to?
see. I'm gonna say between 85, 88, I think.
Okay.
Somewhere in
So
there.
Asia years.
Yeah. So I, you know, knew Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but it wasn't until I got into college and roommated with a friend who, really, I was more the hard rock prog guy growing up, and he was more the earlier jazzy prog rock guy, and we just ended up as roommates together and spent much of our time sitting in our room like, here, let me play you this record.
Probably
Here,
got
let me
no
play you this
schoolwork
record.
done.
And exactly that. And we just were sitting there listening to our records and other college things you do when listening to records. And so that, you know, the Carnival #9 impressions were, and that one in particular, that was when we really, like, I knew, you know, Welcome Back My Friends, of course you knew that, you know, from growing up, but that was when I really got into the whole, you know, entire, you know, suite of all of those pieces was all, you know, those college years. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, I
my
love
old roommate.
all three. I love Third Impression, which does not get
Yeah.
the airplay it should, or even back then, of course. So I have like back here, right there, bunch of cassettes, and behind that is a bunch of little stacks of cassettes. Up here, I've got reel-to-reel tapes. Up on that other shelf up there, I've got reel-to-reel tapes. The one thing I do not have, and I have stuff from this wonderful first real band I was in. I was 15, 16, 17 when I was in this band. And for a while, we had a keyboard player, and we played Carnival 9, all of the First Impression, parts 1 and 2. I don't have that on tape anywhere. And it breaks my heart because I learned it like I knew it when I was younger, but I learned to play it for the band when I was 15. And we crushed it because the keyboard player knew it inside and out. And that, of course, made it easy. You know, you got someone doing Keith Emerson's parts, and you just need a great bass player to follow those lines and a drummer that can, you know, articulate all those little nuances. And I was able to do that because thankfully I have a really good ear and a good memory when it comes to music. Now, I don't remember if I'm wearing underwear or if I'm even supposed to be, but music, I could pull out good thing that I had a cap. I could pull out a 20-minute piece I haven't played in 10 years and just like, oh yeah, you know, my timing might be off on some changes, but I know the roadmap. It's like tattooed in my brain. So I just love that music. And that second impression always really, it's got some haunting moments in it, and almost sounds like, gosh, they would kill me if that, hopefully Carl's not watching. Sounds like a Scooby-Doo part in the middle where like it's real anticipatory, and you know, you hear the flexi tone,
Yeah.
you know, that whole thing. I just was always so intrigued by the vast array of music and dynamics and complexity that those three impressions covered collectively. Just a fascinating album.
Yeah.
And they were able to do it live.
The three guys. I mean, we've talked so many times about, like, you know, the scope of Rush, three guys, but you know, even ELP, it was like three guys being an orchestra on stage.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Well, folks, we hope you loved this, or at least liked it, or at least understood the theme. And if you're watching this on the archive, go ahead and chime in. Tell us what your favorite rock songs are that have jazz influences on any instrument. Doesn't have to be drums. And if you play an instrument and you want to show examples of you paying homage to that, there's a link in the post where you could send those videos in, and we'll put them on Drum Talk TV. Lou, thanks again, as always, taking time on a Sunday.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, and our next episode, do we have a date picked?
I don't know. I'm
trying-
not sure if we do.
I'm trying to lift up the
Take a
page
look.
to my,
I think we only have a tentative.
yeah, it's either going to be the 12th or the 19th, folks. Will let you know, but we'll probably do the one where we were going to select drum breaks.
I think so.
Was that it? Yeah.
I believe so.
Yeah. Already a slew of them just came to my mind. Out of 20, 18 of them were Neil Peart. I remember that was what you waited for, or at least us drummers, when you got a new Rush album. You just wanted to plow through the tracks till you found that fill. That's the fill for that album. You know, you just, and then you're satisfied. Okay, it's a good album. It's got that fill. All right. Thanks, everybody, so much. We will see you again soon. And go ahead and check out more episodes. There's 11 more of these fun things. See ya.
Take care, folks.